Hi, my name is Greg, and I'm the product manager of IK Retargeting in Unreal. This is the first video that's going to go over the basics of creating an IK rig, an IK retargeter, and being able to retarget animations from one character to another. Specifically, this video is going to go over retargeting for bipeds. However, this applies for any characters that you will ever want to retarget within Unreal. And as I stated in the intro video for this learning path, I will be demonstrating a lot of these concepts within the Unreal Editor for Fortnite, or UEFN for short. All the videos I'm going to be doing will apply well for both UE and UEFN users, with one video or two that may go over the very specific parts on the UE side that hasn't been brought over to UEFN quite yet. However, I hope that this is helpful for you as you are retargeting characters in any project that you have, either within UE or UEFN. So, yeah, let's get started. This project that I have is called the Animation 101 Starter for the UEFN side, and you can find that by going under File, New Project, with your Unreal Editor for Fortnite open, and if you go to Feature Templates, you'll find the Animation 101 project, which will provide you with this FM mannequin here, and there will already be assets here that will handle retargeting, such as the IK FM mannequin and the retarget asset for the FM mannequin. But today, we're not going to be using those assets. We're going to be creating everything from scratch to go over, just provide a base overview of what is retargeting and the process of it in Unreal. Oh, now, before I begin, I need to explain what the IK rig does. So the IK rig, if we open just the demonstration asset up, is what we would call a characterization asset. This helps us define certain goals and limits in terms of how the character is posed, and also defines the chains that we're going to be retargeting from. So you can imagine a character being broken up into different parts. So, for example, if we want the left leg, right, highlighted here, we will want to break that up into from the hips all the way down to the foot. Same thing with the spine. You just want the spine bones. Same thing with arm. You just want the arm, and etc. etc. And in IK rig, that's where we define the splitting apart of the skeleton and be able to assign them in order to transfer animations across from one character to another. And as I said before, this process is called characterization. For this video, we're only going to go over the retarget chains and the retarget route. We won't talk about full body IK or any of that sort. We will go over that in a later video, but this is just to provide a base overview of what I will mean by characterization. So let's take a look at what skeletal meshes we have in this project. So by default, there will be the FM mannequin, and I have imported two or three different skeletal meshes. One is the Stacobot, which is from our engine examples over on the Unreal Engine that you can get from the launcher. And this Starfish, which is a character from our content examples that showcases a lot of different uh, retargeting aspects as well in that project if you're interested in looking at that as a Unreal Engine user. And then this Xbot character, which I grabbed from Mixamo, which I also have some other animations that I can preview that I want to retarget from. So I want this Mixamo animation to play on any of my characters here. I want to be able to play it on the FM mannequin. I want to be able to play it on Stackobot. I want to be able to play it on the Starfish. Any of these characters. Any other characters that I also bring in as well. Walrus, Squid, etc., etc. And I want not only just this one, but all of these animations to be able to come across without having to reauthor them completely from scratch. So this is where retargeting comes in, which is the process of transferring animations from one character to another. So let's get into how to create an IK rig and what we would do in order to set up the retarget chains and map them across. So I'm going to go into this Xbot and I'm going to hit Control B, which will automatically switch my content browser to where this folder is. Also turn off the filters. And there are two ways to create an IK rig in here. So one is right click, animation. Under the retargeting menu, I can say IK rig, and it's going to allow me to input a name if I want to. For now, I'm not. And if I double click on this, I would get an empty IK rig asset. And what I would have to do is under my preview skeletal mesh, I would have to assign the skeletal mesh that I want to use. And it will populate, it will show in the viewport, and I will have all of my bones here. If you want easier path forward instead of having to do all of those steps that I just mentioned, you can right click on any skeletal mesh asset, go to create IK rig, and it's going to automatically provide you a nice name for it. So it's just going to put IK underscore whatever the scale mesh name is. And if I open this one up, you'll see that the preview mesh is already set and the hierarchy is already imported in. So I do not have to worry about any setting that I have to do like I had before with a blank IK rig. So I'm all ready to go with this one. So which is great. I'm going to save that. Um, I'm going to go back to the Xbot and delete that other one that I had created just so that way I can clean my project up. And we can get started on defining the parts of our character. So the first thing that we would want to define is something called the retarget root. Here in the IK retargeting panel, you can see that my retarget root is set to none. So what is a retarget root? Retarget root is the first bone of your character motion, or well, I would say the base part of your character motion. In this case, with the mixed mode character, it's pretty easy. That is just the first bone of the hierarchy, which is the hips. And I can select that hips, say right click, set retarget root. Now, I want to emphasize that the retarget root should be the first bone of your character motion, meaning that it isn't always the first bone in the hierarchy. A lot of other DCCs or digital creation content applications have have like a root bone or a bone that's at 000 or at the origin, and there's a bunch of other bones that are intermediary or in between any of those between your hips and your root that you might think is your retarget root, but your retarget root is actually just the main the first bone of your character motion, which in this case is the hips. And most of the time it will be the hips, just no matter what. So I would just always recommend putting that as your character's hips, whether you have another biped or another creature of some sort. It will most likely always be the hips. Now let's go ahead and create a retarget chain. So we're going to split this up into a couple of different parts. We're going to split it up by the legs. We're going to split it up by the spine, the head, the each of the individual fingers, the arms, and the clavicles. And we'll talk about why you will want to separate your arms and your clavicles. So, but first, let's look at the spine and everything else. So what I can do is I can select my bones in here and I can go to plus add or this little plus add new chain, and it's going to automatically try to provide a nice name for it, and it's going to tell me the start bone and the end bone and if there's a IK goal, which is set to none. And I can just immediately say add chain. We won't talk about add chain and goal quite now, because that will be for a later video when we go over full body IK and what that will entail for IK retargeting. And this cancel button. So I'm just going to say cancel, because there's also another method to create retarget chains, which is if I select these and I right click new retarget chain, I can say add chain and my chain appears. And if I just deselect what I had on the bones by just selecting an empty area and I select my spine, we can see that, hey, look, the retarget chain bones I have here are set to blue, which is great. So I have my retarget root, I have my spine, and let's go and create chains for the legs. So I'm going to go on the left side and go ahead and create a chain for this entire leg. Now, if you're familiar with other software, most people will define the leg down to the ankle bone. So, whoops, I'm going to select that upper leg and then go down to the foot. Now, for retargeting, I would recommend actually going all the way down to the toe. This is because it will be important for foot contacts, as we can see that this bone here, right, is more closely aligned to the ground versus the ankle. And also, I don't want to create just a single bone chain just for the foot. So I'm going to include my hips, my knee, my ankle, and the ball area of the foot. And I can right click and say add new retarget chain. But before I do that, what I'm actually going to do, let me reselect that, is I'm going to also select my chain for the arm and also select the chain for the neck and head. So I'm going to just hit Control. I'm going to hold down Control and use my left mouse click. Oops, the right one. I want to go on the left side. And I'm just going to Control select that and hold on Shift to just go to my hand. So I have both my leg and my arm selected. I can also do that for my neck and head. And now if I right click and say new retarget chain, it's going to automatically pick up the different branching that I had in my selection. So here, left leg, that works. So that's up leg all the way down to toe base. Great. So we'll add that chain. Then it's going to see left arm, which will does just this left arm here all the way down to the hand. So add chain. And head is just these two bones, which is perfect. This bone we're not going to include because that doesn't affect the mesh of the character. So we're going to say add chain. And once that is done, those would populate on this side. And if I deselect in the viewport and I reselect all of these, I can see, great. I have my retarget chains all set up, which is awesome. Now I can do that for my fingers as well. So on the left side, I'm just gonna Control click and then Shift select down the thumb, Control click on index, Shift select down the index, and so on and so forth. I'm ignoring the last bone because I know these bones do not affect the mesh at all. Like if I were to move them, they wouldn't affect the mesh. So thus allows me to just select these three bones here for each of the fingers. I'll right click, new retarget chain. And looks like it didn't come up with some nice names, which is unfortunate, but that's okay. I can just go in and retype those, set add chain, index, add chain, middle, add chain, ring, add chain, pinky, add chain, and wait for that to finish up. And that will appear on my IK retargeting panel. If I select all of them, I can see, sweet, I got all of my chains here. And I'll do one more before I do another action, which is creating one for the clavicle. So what we recommend is to have a separate chain for your clavicle because you may need to have different settings on your clavicle, so that way you want it to be more stiff, or you don't want it to be controlled as much by the IK, and you have a bit more finer tuning on that. As the IK works better with the arms like this, but completely up to you. It is dependent on each situation. This is just the way that we would recommend it. So with the clavicle, I'm just going to say new retarget chain, and we're going to name this clavicle, add chain. So that's automatically added. Sweet. And now if I select all the left chains, I can right click and say mirror chain, and that will just mirror it across. So, and also we'll change up the name. So that will be right. So cool. Right arm, thumb, index, middle, ring, pinky, and the clavicle. And that'll get mirrored across. And if I select all of these, we can see all the bones that I want to retarget is all set up along with the retarget root. And that's basically it that we'll need for characterizing the mixable character. Some folks have asked before if you need full body IK in order to retarget, and no, you actually don't. Especially for if we're just going to map these chains across. IK retargeting is useful for handling ground contacts and other points that you would want to affect, but in this case, since we're just wanting to get the generic motion across from one character to another, this is all we have to do. And I'll save, and that is great. If I exit, I can go ahead and create another IK rig for the FM mannequin because we're just going to be retargeting those animations across. So what I'll do is, once again, I'll go and right click, create. Oh, wait, my bad. On the skeleton mesh, right click, create IK rig. And I'll name this to IK FM mannequin demo, just so that way I'm not getting confused with this one that I have created. And once that's ready to be open, I'll open it. I'll do the same exact process with what I had with the Mixamo skeleton. So I'll stop the recording now and show you the final result for this. Alrighty, I have this FM mannequin set up. Just to give you a bit of a recap, I set the retarget route to the pelvis. There are bones above the pelvis or that are siblings to the pelvis, but this is where the main character motion starts. I did include a single retarget chain where the start bone and end bone for the root is the same, kind of similar to the clavicles, and I'll go over that in a little bit. I wanted to create this just to show what happens if you don't have the same number of chains. And in this exercise, I've also chosen to ignore the metacarpal bones of the mannequin, the twist bones, any attachment bones, and IK bones as well. This is because I know the mixed mode character, we will not be using those bones anyway. And if I wanted to, I could have created chains and had certain settings for them to transfer animations across. But um, for now, I'm not worried about that. I just have these off to the side, so that's why I did not include them for this exercise specifically. So there's a lot of different bones that you'll see won't have any sort of a retarget chain set up to it. I ignored the metacarpals because the Mixable character did not have metacarpals and were 3-bone fingers, so including the metacarpals, while Retargeter would have been fine to transfer them over, it might have not looked the best. So that's why I decided to ignore them. So I have all my chains here. If I select them, you can see that I follow the same setup as last time where I had separate fingers, arms, full leg, separate clavicles, the spine, and the head. And this looks a little misorganized, so I can right click and say sort chains, and it'll sort them by the hierarchy, which is perfect. And I am going to now save, and we can go and look at retargeting the animations from Mixamo to this FN character, which is perfect. So I will exit out of this, and I will go back to the mixed mode character just so that way we're not too confused with the assets that are there. So I can create a retargeter, IK retargeter, 2 different ways. The first way is right click, animation, retargeting, IK retargeter, and that'll give me a blank retargeter asset that if I'm not going to name it right now, but if I open it up, I get an empty retargeter asset that I have to set some settings on for the source IK rig asset and the target IK rig asset. But for now, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is exit out of there, delete this, and we're going to use the second method, which I much prefer, is right-clicking on the IK rig and saying create IK retargeter. And it's going to automatically say this is RTG underscore XBot. So I want to name this RTG underscore XBot underscore FN underscore mannequin. So that way it's implying that it's the XBot to the mannequin. So once that's saved, I'll open that up and I'll zoom out and we can see my source IK rig asset is already prepared for me. Great. Now I'll go and add the IKFM mannequin demo, and you'll see a couple of different things. First of all, the hierarchy has been changed, which we'll go over in just a second. And I do have a tab for the source and the target hierarchy, which we'll go over why. Um, and under chain mapping, I see all the chains that I have that I had created on the FM Mannequin and the XBot. Now, the one key difference is that there's this root bone here. And you'll see that I try to map it to the head, which I'm going to guess is going to have a lot of undesirable results, especially on the root bone. So we don't want that. So we can actually set this to none. Or if you want to be absolutely sure that you've got the exact names across and not just some sort of soft naming mapping, you can go to under auto map chains and say map all exact. And I'll ensure that all of the names will be exactly named um, as such. So target chain for root is set to none, spine, left clavicle, left arm, index, pinky, blah, 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 etc., etc. We can go down the list, but perfect. So now we're actually just ready to retarget. There's some other edits that we can do, obviously, with how the initial posing starts, but I can just start playing animations and I see, hey, look, my animations have transferred across, which is pretty neat. There's obviously some edits that I need to do, which we'll go over in a second, but we can see that I can play all of these animations and it's looking pretty solid. This is just a simple FK retarget. All I've done is just define chains. I've had no full body IK added. I can just play any of these. Play any of these standing up or football catch, quarterback pass, and it's looking pretty good. Now, let's talk about the poses. So we can see here, if I select this empty area, I can change the offset so that way I get these asset settings back and I can move my target mesh across. We see that the arms are really strange. Here, the Xbox character has their hands pretty close, while the mannequin here is their arms are a bit floppy and intertwined and behind each other and constantly meshing under, like colliding under the mesh. So that's not ideal. So what we want to do is play with the retarget poses. So right now I'm under the running retarget mode. If I go to these three dots, I want to say show retarget pose. And we can see that this is because of the rather large deltas that we see for the angles of, say, the Xbot to the mannequin. So if we were to zero this out, we can see a couple of things happening here. One, the arm, that's a fairly large angle offset that the retargeter has to keep. The fingers are bent on the FM mannequin, while on the Mixamo character, they are straight. Uh, the legs, they're a little bit farther apart, while the Mixamo character has the feet more closer together. And the head is looking, while this is bent, the mesh looks like it's looking fairly straight on, and we would have to double check that on the FM mannequin as well. So what we can do is we can edit the pose that the target is in order to better fit our Mixable character. So what I'm going to do is I have this large hierarchy, which is neat, but I don't want to see any of my bones that I don't have as a part of a retarget. So I can go here and say hide bones not in retarget, and I get a much better list. And in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and move this arm up so that way it's planar or in this kind of T pose compared to this relax pose. So right now I'm on my default pose, so I can create one. So I'm just going to say create. Sure, we'll call it custom retarget pose. And I'll go under my edit retarget pose mode. So that way I get my manipulator and I can start moving this around. I can turn on snapping if I want to, but right now I don't. I can eyeball it and do all sorts of things in order to make it straight. But this could be a bit time consuming. So let's see if there's a better route for this. So if I select this upper arm and I go under bone, I am in local, and if I wanted to, I could see if I zero this out, if that would give me a better result, which it looks like it's giving me a pretty good result. I might have to tweak the clavicle a little bit, but that's pretty fine. I can do the same on the arm here. That has that natural bend, so I'll just add that back in. I think it was -30. Oh, whoops, that was the relative offset. So I want to go to the bone, local, just say 0, 0, and 0. So that way that's flat. Same thing for the wrist. Go back to bone, 0, 0, 0. That doesn't look like that did what I wanted it to do. So maybe if I want to, I could rotate this back. So all different sorts of things, all different edits that I can do for this. If I don't like what I did for this one, I can use the reset button. So that will reset either selected bones, or if I go all the way to the top, I can say reset selected and child bones. Oh wait, I selected the wrong one. My bad. And now reset the arm entirely. So I can do all sorts of edits and make that work. For the bones that are not a part of the retarget route, those will only house rotational offsets. The retarget route will actually have location and rotation in case if you wanted to lift it up or needed it to be higher, needed the hips to be higher or lower. But I'm not going to go through the full process of seeing uh, of making me suffer and make it all straight and narrow. And I don't want you to sit through that. So what we're going to do is we're going to import from an animation sequence. Now the FM mannequin should have been provided with a T-pose. So this FM mannequin T-pose, that's just 1 frame long. And we're going to say this is the T-pose. We're going to import as a retarget pose. And we can see that with this, I get my straighter arms. I might have to do some tweaks on the thumb, but I can do that outside this video a little bit. And my feet are pretty straight and they look pretty aligned. So now I have that pose and that's set as the current retarget pose. If I play this defender now, we can see those arms are much better. Let me just offset that a little bit. And if I don't want to see any of these other things, I can turn off debug draw and also turn off my bone hierarchy. So set that to none. I just want to see just a silhouette. That's looking pretty good. I can go into some of these different animations and kind of see how that plays out for any of these others. And that's not looking too bad. Same thing with this standing up. Nice. If I want to, I could tweak some settings as well. So, for example, on the fingers, I know that I might want a different rotation mode because they have the same amount of bones. And that's the same for my clavicles because, once again, they have the same amount of bones, right? So instead of it being interpolated, what I could do is if I shift select all of these or control select all of these, my bad, um, and set the rotation mode instead of interpolated, which is, if you look at the tooltip, you'll provide you an idea, but basically it just takes it across on a curve and normalizes the motion. But instead, maybe I want them to be 1-to-1, so that way they match the same number of bones that they have because they're the same number, right? So that's great for fingers. That's great for the single bones. So it's not always great with the other limbs because you might have multi bone limbs, but in this case, that would have been fine for these, but we get a pretty good result from there. And if you're happy with all of these, if you're happy with how it's transferred and everything of that sort, we can select all of these, say export selected animations, go under character, I'll go like mannequin, sorry, and under animations, I'll add a new folder by right clicking new folder and say retargeted anims. We'll say this is FK retargeted anims, so that way I know the difference. And I'll just say I'll add a prefix of FK underscore RTG underscore. and say export. And it'll go through this progress bar showing off all the assets that's exporting. So it's going to be duplicating them and then retargeting them. I'll pause this video so that way it doesn't take too long for this to get done. All right, I'm back. Let's open up that content drawer, go to mannequin, animations, FK retargeted anims, and there's all the animations that I've retargeted. I can open them up. You can see I get the defender, which is great. We're back. And now I can immediately use this in my gameplay animations or in my sequencer and have them play for my UE fan experience or for my film or game in UE or anything else in there. Which is perfect. Now, something else I'd like to note with the retargeter that's pretty interesting is if I go back to my Mixamo character and I go back to here, I could switch these if I wanted to. So let's say that target is the Mixamo character and the source IK rig is the demo. I will change my target back to just whatever default. And I could then change my source retarget pose if I wanted to. So we'll go again and bring in that T pose, import. Okay. And now I have all the animations that I have retargeted and also any of the emotes that I had on the FN mannequin. And I can get that onto my Mixamo character. And because these IK rigs have already been defined, I only need to define them once for any character of the same skeleton. So um, for something like metahumans or all of that sort, there is one IK rig that will work for metahumans because they all share the same skeleton, right? And it actually works for all similar skeleton hierarchies too. So I could have applied the IK rig from the metahumans onto my FM mannequin if I wanted to. So which is super neat. So just to show a little interesting part with the retargeter where you can just slap in any sort of IK rigs and just try different animations across the board. So yeah, hopefully that tutorial was super helpful. I know it was a bit long, but I just wanted to cover the basics of just simple FK retargeting. You don't have to add full body IK. You can do this to transfer animations of characters of any size or proportions, or just anything like a biped to a squid to a gorilla, something else, etc., etc. So we really hope that this empowers UE and UEFN users alike in order to play with animations and look forward to see what you create. The next video, I'll be going over the full body IK setup, and after that, we'll be covering IK retargeting. So see y'all then. Hi, my name is Greg, and I'm the product manager of IK Retargeting. This is the second video in this series going over retargeting bipeds in Unreal. If you're confused about what project I have open and the full context of this, I recommend looking at my previous videos in this series going over simple FK retargeting and just the introduction going over the context of this entire video series. So I'm going to continue where I left off in the simple FK retargeting video. If you recall, we had a IK rig created with retarget chains. And what we did for that was to use to retarget to our Mixamo character, where we created an IK retargeter, and we can play any of these animations, and we can see that it retargets across. So this video is going to go over how to set up a full body IK solver on our target character, so that way we can use the IK part of IK retargeting. In here, I'm using the same project as I used before, and we're just going to continue off with the mannequin. So, but instead of working off of this asset, I want to show you different ways to create a full body IK solver and show you how to set that up inside your IK rig.
So before I get started, let me define some terms. So what is full body IK? Well, IK is short for inverse kinematics. So basically what we're going to be adding is a full body inverse kinematics solver onto our character. The full body IK is defined by basically some sort of end effectors or goals or manipulators, usually at the ends of the character limbs. So in this case, it would be the hands and the balls of the feet. And when we manipulate those, that will affect the full body of the character that we've defined. So that way it can be manipulated into certain poses. This can be very useful in retargeting, as you may need to handle certain ground or hand contacts and certain characters' reaches, especially when you're requiring characters in different proportions. Now, I just want to reiterate that you do not need any sort of IK solvers when you're retargeting, as demonstrated in the previous video and right now. We created a retargeter with some FK chains or some retarget chains in order to do what's called an FK retarget, which is basically mapping limbs, so such as this left arm to this left arm, or this left leg to this left leg. And we can see that we can easily retarget those without having to add an IK solver. But an IK solver would be useful in a lot of different ways. So if I play the ref pose and zero out this target mesh offset, we can see that this character is fairly one-to-one with the Mixamo character that I have here, but the Mixamo character is a little taller or a little bigger than my FM mannequin. The legs are a tad bit longer. We can kind of see that in comparison with these hip bones all the way down to the legs. So we know that the strides is going to be a bit longer for the Mixamo character because the legs are longer. So the ground contacts might not be as correct on these proportions of the FM mannequin. So what I may want to use full body IK for is to have better foot contacts based off of the proportions of my character. And it's the same thing with smaller to larger or larger to smaller. You may have a different reach or different stride lengths, or different horizontal motion on the hips because the character might travel as far because of those long strides. So these are all things to consider when you're retargeting, and that's why I would recommend using full body IK. Now, if we go into IK rig, which I'll do it on the mannequin. And if you're in the Anim 101 project, or if you have the third-person template project on the Unreal Engine side, you'll know that there's already an IK rig provided for your mannequin. But we're going to create one from scratch, so that way we can go over the full process of how to create an IK solver. So I'm not going to open up the previous one. I'll do some edits on that in just a bit, just to show, and in the next video to show how that applies with IK retargeting. But for now, this video is just going to go over the setup that you may want to use for full body IK for bipeds. So if you remember, you can create a new IK rig by going under right-click Animation, Retargeting, IK rig. Or if you want it to automatically set with the preview mesh, you can right-click on the skeletal mesh, create IK rig, and we'll keep that as just IK FM mannequin 1. Go ahead and open that, and we get our IK editor, IK rig editor with our preview mesh set. The easiest way to create a solver is under this window, or under this panel here on the left called Solver Stack. I can add a new solver, and I get a list of different solvers that I can add. For IK retargeting bipeds, we recommend using full body IK. Actually, just in all retargeting cases, we recommend using full body IK. This is because there are certain settings. So if we go back to the Mixamo retargeter, you all might already be familiar, but if you select, say, the left arm, we have certain settings that we can manipulate for our retarget, and you'll see that we have a section for IK. Right now it's grayed out because there's no IK goal specified. We'll talk about that in just a second. But basically, all of these apply towards the goals for your IK solver. And most of these will really only work best with the full body IK. There are some solvers that do work okay with some of these settings, but full body IK will work with any setting within the retargeter and will get the best generic solve that you'll have for all retargets. So that's why we recommend full body IK. So I can add that solver in, and we have full body IK active with that checkbox, but it is missing a root bone. This is because all IK solvers need some sort of root bone in order to identify as the root bone of the solver. So in this case, I'm going to say the root bone of the full body IK solver is my pelvis, so similar to the retarget root. And most likely you would want the retarget root and your root bone for your full body IK solver to be the same if you're retargeting. So in this case, I'll say set the root bone of the solver to my pelvis. And then now we get an update saying missing goals. So what I can do with my full body IK solver selected, I'm just going to select my hand and select the balls of my feet. And just going to right click and say new goal, new IK goal, or I can use the shortcut Control N. So when I do that with the full body IK selected, I get my goals and they populate in my viewport. I'm going to lower the bone thickness by just changing the draw size to a little bit smaller so that way I can see the goals a little better. And when I select this goal and move this around, hey, voila, my character is moving around with my full body IK solver. And we can see how much that affects, which is great. You might have had some issues when you added your goal and it is not affecting your character. And that's possibly due to the full body IK solver not being selected when you had the goals created. So I'll show you what that means. So let me filter out by just goals and select these goals and say delete. And I'll go back and clear the filter. If I go under my hands again and without the solver selected, so if I just select the hands and the balls of the feet, and I say right click new goal, you'll see the same process happens, but a couple of things happen here. There's some warnings telling me that the goal is not connected to any solver and it will have no effect. So if I were to pull around this goal, you see that it's not being affected by full body IK. That's because the goals are not affected. The solver is missing goals for the goals to manipulate. So I'll go is show only goals, select all of these with a shift select, and I can right click and say connect goal to selected solver. And we get this back and we get this behavior as we had before, which is great. So the reason why you would want to connect goals is because there are other IK solvers that you can either have different goals or the same goals as that IK solver. But in this case, for retargeting, we're just going to use this one solver and these goals and have it connected to there. If you did have other solvers, you'll see additional goal settings that you would have for each of the solvers that you have connected. Now, I want to show you a different method of how to create these while you're handling your retarget. So let me clear those filters. Actually, you know what? Let me re-enable those filters and delete the goals and delete the full body IK with the trash can. Clear the filters. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to create my full body IK with my retarget chains. So what I'll do is I'll select my arm bones. So the left upper arm, the right upper arm, and down below, and my legs, left leg, right leg. Now we're going to right click and say new retarget chain. Instead of previously in the last video, we said add chain, but I'm going to say add chain and goal. So we'll go ahead and add chain and goal. And we get this dialog asking if I want to add the full body IK solver. I'll say yes. And then another dialog will come up. So we'll add chain and goal, add chain and goal, add chain and goal. And while we wait, we'll see the chains being populated in my IK retargeting window. And we'll also see new IK goals being affected on or being added to those chains. All right, those chains have been added and we have the goals. And you can see that the goals were added along with the full body IK solver. It is missing the root bone, so what I can do is just go to my pelvis and set root bone on selected solver. And you'll see that the goals are also named based off of the chain names, which is really awesome. So that way you don't get confused with the two. So left arm goal, right arm goal, left leg, right leg, etc., etc. If I already have my chains created and I didn't have an IK goal, I can delete the goals just to show. Go back to the filter. If I add a goal onto my hand, there's going to be this dialog that comes up and says if I want to assign the goal to the retarget chain, and I say yes. That is because the hand was the end bone of that chain. So I can do that for the hand and the balls of the feet as well. And what we would recommend for retargeting bipeds is that you have your goal always as the end bone with your retarget chain. This so that way the retargeter can easily assign those IK settings like I had shown before, so that way it can affect it while being retargeted. So now we get all of this goodness and we get all the posing and those retarget chains. So those are all the different ways that you can add goals and create a solver and do all sorts of different things for that. Awesome. Now let's talk about how we can improve the solver's ability to pose this character. So in this case, right now, when I am in global space and I move this in Z, we can see those hips are being really affected by that goal. And we can see that the hips aren't planar, and even as I drag this out, we actually want those hips to always be flat no matter what. And there's a couple of ways we can do this. The first way I would like to show is using bone settings and stiffness. This could be useful for some quadruped creatures or any other character, but for bipeds, this could also be useful as well, where if I right-click on the bone and say add settings to selected bone, and go under bone settings, I can, don't know why those were not expanded, but I can go under rotation stiffness and just slowly get that stiffness back on the rotation, so on the hips, and I get a pretty planar result on the hips right there. So that's one way to do it. We'll go over more bone settings in terms of how those affect the other bones, but another way I wanted to show off and what I would recommend is, oops, let me reset and let me get that back up so that way we can test against, is under the full body IK settings, I recommend changing the root behavior. So this would, if we want to change it to pinned input, basically this will pin the hips to the input of the incoming pose. Right now, since there's nothing incoming, we don't have to worry about that, and we'll get a weird result with the leg, which we can fix in just a second. But as we're moving this around, you can see, hey, the hips aren't moving, which is great, and that's exactly what we want. If we were to play any animations, you'll see some of my retarget animations from before. So if I were to play this dab, which by the way, you can preview these assets, and full body IK is additive, so you can see how it's affected. The hips stay in place pretty much because it's set to pin to input. If I had this at pre-pull originally, we can see that the hips are going to get affected, which is not really what we want. We want the hips to pretty much stay in place, but you can play with that, and it's what we recommend. However, for different scenarios, you might actually want to change your behavior for your retarget. So just as a fair warning. But now let's talk about how we can fix the legs. So right now, as I'm moving this up, right, we'll see that the leg is bent at a really weird angle, and this is not something that we want. We want to fix the upper leg and the lower leg and how it bends. So what we can do is under thigh and calf on the left leg, we can add some bone settings. Add settings to select the bone. And these are going to be settings that are tied to the full body IK. And we can add all sorts of individual bone settings to to basically get the effect that we want. So in this case, I could up the stiffness if I wanted to, or I could add limits to how the leg bends. But what I'm actually going to use is something called preferred angles. So preferred angles are basically when you move the effector, or the goal in this case, up or around, these bones are going to be rotated towards a preferred angle, and it won't go past those limits. So or past those angles. So I'm going to go ahead and say prefer angles, and I already know the value that I want for these legs. For your character, it might be different, so you would want to know your bone orientations for your character. But in this case, I'm just going to set these to bend at -90 on Z. And we can see that we get a much better result as we move that up. So as I'm moving this up and down, we can see that I'm getting a much better result on that leg bend. And as I'm moving this around, it's pretty solid. And you can see that it's bending pretty much at the right preferred angles that I want. I even get a little bit of that heel lift as I'm moving. As I'm moving this up. Something to note, if you want an easy way to debug in terms of how your settings are affecting your full body IK, under the full body IK settings, you can go under iterations, and you can see what will happen when you lower the iterations down to 0. So basically bone settings and none of the goal settings are basically affecting that. So if I were to reset, you can see how just the IK is solved without any of those additional settings. And then you can just tweak those iterations back up just to see how those settings get applied. And it's a great way to debug your IK solver. So I'll reset, and I'll add those same settings to my thigh and calf. So I'll go ahead and add those settings in. Same thing on the preferred angles and -90. And now when I select both goals and move them up, we can see that they're bending in the right directions, and they have the same behaviors, which is great. We also want to do that on the arms, because we want to make sure that the arms are bending at a preferred angle when we move them. Especially when we move them up, we want to make sure that that elbow does bend properly. So what we want to do is on the lower arm, we would want to add some settings. So if you don't want to see any of the fingers, one easy way is just to hide unaffected bones. So that way I collapse that hierarchy a bit and just access the bones that I know that I'm going to affect in the full body IK. So I'll add settings to those bones as well. And I can multi-select, and I'm going to add some preferred angles. And in this case, I already know the number, which would be +90. And we'll go ahead and play with that, and we see that we get a nice bend on the elbow, which is awesome. So another thing I'm noticing is that I have a lot of effects on the spine as I'm moving around this, which isn't really that great because I actually want the spine to be a bit more stiff as I pull this goal out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add settings to the spine, and I can multi-select and add those. And I could fiddle the numbers a bit, but I know that around 90% stiffness is probably what I would want. I could go a full 1 if I wanted to, but that doesn't look as great. I want a little bit of pull. I just don't want it to completely bend the spine backwards as I'm manipulating this. So you can see that I'm getting a pretty good solve there in that manner. And I'll also probably want that on the clavicle as well. So I'll add some settings on the clavicles and set those to 1. And we get we get a bit more of a stiffer clavicle, so that way it doesn't bend as much, and most of that motion is on the arm. And that's pretty much it in terms of what we have to do for the full body AK. If you aren't happy with how strong maybe your goals are, there's a couple of different ways that we can affect that. If we just isolate to only goals and we look at some of the goal settings, we can turn off pull chain alpha if we want to, which will affect how much the pull is on the goal. So if I were to turn that off, that could help if I want to, so in case if I didn't want that shoulder up so high. And I can do that collectively on all settings if I wanted to. If I know I want pull chain alpha only on specific settings, I could, turn those back on. Or if I know for sure I don't want pull chain alpha on any of my goals, I can select my full body IK and just turn that pull chain alpha completely off on every goal. Another thing that we can also look at is the strength. So if I reselect that hand and I see that strength alpha, if I pull this out a little bit more and I think that that strength is a little too strong, I could lower the strength if I want to, a little bit down further, but that's completely up to you. These most likely are the ideal settings that you would keep, with pull chain alpha being set to 0 and having all of these different bone settings here. And that's pretty much what we would recommend for setting up a full body IK. Now, I want to reiterate, these are what we recommend, but there are certain use cases to where that you may not want some of these settings. So, for example, in some cases, you might think that the preferred angles for your arms or your legs are too strong when you retarget. So what you might want to do is within your IK rig, just turn off those preferred angles. So you can just isolate those bone settings and just select the ones that you need and just turn those off and just have those off specifically for your retarget. But for most cases, you'll probably want to keep them on, especially when you're retargeting animations. But once again, these are just strong suggestions. They're not they won't fit every use case, but we found that these fit almost every use case that we have found for retargeting bipeds. So yeah, that's how we set up the full body IK for bipeds, and you can apply this on your target characters. I want to reiterate that you do not need IK solvers for every IK rig asset that you use. You only need it for your target. So that will only affect these settings here in the IK in the chain settings. Only affect the target IK rig. So you do not necessarily need one for your source IK rig. However, if you know that you're going to if you're going to reuse this IK rig for other retargets, you may want to throw on full body IK. It will not affect how it's being used on the source asset if you're retargeting, but it's just more for flexibility's sake, if you like.
A slight addendum that I did not cover in the original part of the video was something called Excluded Bones within the IK rig. So here I have our demo IK rig that we had set up. And let's say I wanted to, for example, when I pull this up, maybe I didn't want the lower arm to go in that preferred angle, or I don't want the IK to affect, any of these parts. I can actually exclude some bones within the IK solve. So if I said like on the clavicle, the upper arm, and the lower arm, I can right click and say exclude selected bone from solve, and you'll see that the IK is not solving on those bones now. You'll see that the arm still moves, obviously, but just because of how it's parented to spine. But you'll see those bones are not involved in the solve, and you can see them from those hollow bone icons there. So if I were to right-click and include those bones back in the solve, those would appear, and we're good to go on that front. So that's another way that you can affect the bones within full body IK if you don't want to always set the rotation stiffness to 1. But note that that will affect how the IK is solved on your full body pose.
And that's the end of the video. In the next video, we'll be going over how to use this for the IK retargeting part and go over some IK settings. So thanks very much. Looking forward to seeing what you create with IK retargeting. Thanks. Hi, my name is Greg, and I'm the product manager of IK retargeting in Unreal. This is the third video in a series going over how to retarget bipedal characters inside Unreal and UEFN. If you're confused about any of the things that I'm talking about or what project I have open, I highly recommend looking at the previous videos, which go over how to handle creating an IK rig, an IK retargeter to do some simple retargeting, and going over how we set up the full body IK, which, if you recall, that's what we did last time. We had the FM mannequin and we created some goals, some settings, and set up the full body IK and went over all the different settings for that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the retargeter that was created for the Mixmo character and do some IK retargeting here. So with my IK retargeter open, you'll see that I already have it assigned to the IK rig that we had set up for the full body IK. And just to double check, I'll play an animation just to see that retargeting is working just fine. And which it is, which is great. What we're going to do is we're going to go over all the different sort of little tweaks and settings that you can do in order to fine tune your retarget more. But before we go and dive in onto all the properties and all of the settings, we need to understand something called retarget phases. So up here on the top right corner, you'll see there are 3 buttons here: root, FK, and IK, and these are known as our retarget phases. You can kind of imagine it as a order of operations. So what happens is we use the root retarget phase first, then the FK retarget phase, then the IK retarget phase. Now, if you recall, since we didn't have IK on my IK rig, I didn't have any full body IK enabled on my target mannequin. Technically speaking, I was only doing FK retargets, which was just the one-to-one mapping of the chains and interpolating based off of the source chain. But what I didn't go over is the root retarget phase. So if I turn off FK, we can see that the mannequin is just in the T pose in our retarget pose that we had assigned earlier. And if I play, we can see that it's just the hips that are moving. And this is because right now it's only retargeting the retarget root, which, if you recall what the retarget root is, that is what we have defined as the first bone of that houses the main character motion. So that's what this is. And if we go to the Mixamo character, we also have assigned it to the hips here. So that's what's happening. That's all the root retarget phase is doing. It's just retargeting the retarget roots. And if I were to turn this off, the root phase off, we can see that our mannequin is not doing any retargets. It is just in this T pose or in our retarget pose that we have set. And even when I play animations, nothing's going to happen. Let's turn that back on and look into some of the settings that we can manipulate. So we have these 2 buttons up here called Global and Root. So Global Settings handles basically the phases. You can see how we just turn these on, and they'll have these checkboxes on and off based off of that. And you can imagine like global settings as just the settings for the global of how you transfer your retarget. So when I say global settings, this is what I mean. If I say asset settings, this is if I click in an empty area of the viewport. This is the asset settings where we have assigned the IK rigs and the meshes and your preview settings and some of your debug settings. These are asset settings. This is global settings and root settings, and then these are chain settings. So once again, asset settings, global settings, root settings, and chain settings. And they all will be how you handle and fine tune your retarget. So let's go into global settings first, since that's the first option here. And you'll see, once again, those checkboxes there that are corresponding to that top corner. You'll also see a property called stride warping. So if I turn that on, and let me look for let me look for a different animation, maybe a quarterback pass. Yeah, so that way we can see the different strides. So basically what stride warping does, it scales the IK goals. So that way you can increase or decrease your stride. So if we were to go back to our ref pose, I can do that by saying play ref pose. And if I were to click in this empty area and zero out my target mesh offset, just so that way they're right on top of each other. I'll move that out just a little bit so that we can see the difference. We can see that the leg lengths are just a tad different, right? So the mannequin's legs are a little shorter than the mixed mode character legs, which means that the stride for the mixed mode character is going to be a bit longer than the one for our mannequin. So we might want to look at some stride warping settings, which we can right now. So I have this quarterback pass, and right now it's not like that. The stride is not that different, just because they're so close in the proportion, and she's the Mexico character is just a bit taller. But if we wanted to, I could turn on stride warping. I'll leave everything by default for now. We can toy with them a little bit, and I want to look at these three properties: warp forward, splay, and offset. Warp forwards is just going to increase in the forward direction, which we have determined as y. Splay is just going to scale them out based off of like an average. So like this, you can see that. Or you can add a sideways offset, which would just be scaling in side to side. Now, you'll see that this is actually affecting my hands too. So what we can do is under chain mapping, I'm going to go under my filter and say hide chains without IK. This will only give me the chains that are affected by my IK goals, which are my arms and my legs. And under my arms, under the IK settings, so there are three categories here. There's the FK settings, the IK settings, and speed planting. Under the IK settings, I can turn off affected by IK warping. And I go back to global settings, and now when I manipulate any of these, there we go. When I manipulate display, we can see that it's only affecting the feet and it's not affecting the arms. So I can increase that or decrease that, and I can do all sorts of different edits in order to see how it looks. In terms of the forward direction and the source, you can change if your animation is specifically towards one axis of direction. So by default, it's going to be Y, but you might want that to be negative Y, or you might want it to be Z or X or any of these other axes. But if you also have animation, say like root motion animation, where your direction source isn't necessarily defined by one single axis, you can change your direction source from goals to chain, and then you can determine what chain is actually housing your forward direction. So for bipeds, most likely it would be the root bone. For others, it might be your spine for their quadrupedal characters. So those are just kind of some settings that you can play with in regards to stride warping, and that lives under global settings. Now let's take a look at root settings. And you'll see these reset arrows on my chains. That's because I had set the affected by IK warping to be off, so I can hit reset on both of those, and we can get back to our defaults. And I'm going to go back into root settings to look at what settings I can play with on my retarget root. So we can have different alpha weights. So if I turn off rotation, you'll see that no rotation is being retargeted. Same thing with the translation. So you'll get this in place now, which if you want that, you absolutely can. But in this case, we don't. We want it to be, we want the translation to be weighted. And let's say I wanted to lift the hips higher on the mannequin, or maybe I want them lower. Under the translational offset, I can do that by increasing the Z or just lowering those hips down, and we can see those hips rising up and down. I can also do that for different like translations or different rotations, but this is just to give you an idea of how to raise or lower the hips there. Scale translation is another method of how you can handle your proportional retargeting, especially if your character has shorter legs. So we talked about stride warping, right? Handling how the stride gets scaled. But if you notice, if you have shorter legs, you're still going to travel the same amount, right? So even though your stride might be shorter, the motion that your retarget route is going to travel is still the same distance, which is not ideal, and you would most likely want to scale that down. So you can scale, for example, the horizontal motion a little bit, so that way your target character is not traveling as much as your source if you have a smaller character. Or if you have like a shorter character, you can scale the vertical as well if you like. Scaling the vertical motion is super interesting for like cartoony motion. So if you have a smaller character, you may want to take a look at that. The blend to source property is being able to pin the retargeted bones, so i.e. the target hips, and pin it directly to what the source hips had. So if I go back into my asset settings and I zero out my target mesh offset, and I look at my retarget roots, so these two here, right? I go back to root settings, and if I turn on blend to source, oops, you can see that the target hips bone now is exactly where the source bone is. And if we take a look at that, you can see that that'll entirely affect how my character moves around. And it's matching directly to what the hips have. You'll see how much that lifts up the hips and lifts up the heels a little bit there. If you don't want that on for certain axes on your translation, you can turn down these weights. So for example, if I don't like the height, but I like if I don't like the Z, but I like the X and Y, I can just zero that out, and it still is pinned only on the horizontal planes, on the X and Y. And we can see I can even turn those off, and you see the difference across there. Now, finally, the last thing I want to go over with root settings is these two properties called Effect IK. So right now, if I were to raise my hips, right, the feet are planted. They're stuck because that's where the IK goals are, and we can see where those are from this debug draw, and we can see those cubes right there. But if I want the IKs to move with how I'm moving my retarget route, I can turn on Effect IK Vertical, and we can see that as I'm moving this around, all the IK goals are following along with what offsets I'm applying onto the retarget route. And by default, that is off, but IK horizontal by default is on. So if I were to do this or something like that, the IK would follow. But if I were to turn that off, you'll see that the IK stays and it tries to maintain the pose, even though the retarget route is way out in space. So that is root settings. And that's how you can edit all the different parts of your retarget route. Now let's go into each of the individual chain settings. So I'm going to go and turn off my filter by saying clear filters. And I know I have some bones or some chains that are not mapped, so I'll also turn on hide unmapped chains. So that way I'm only seeing the stuff that I have mapped. And just so that way I'm not looking at the bones overlapping, I'm just going to move this so that way we can see them side by side. Let's take a look at the spine, and we'll just kind of look at these settings in total. We'll start with the FK. So you can change your mapping, obviously, in the chain mapping panel, but you can also change your mapping here. So if you find that you have a lot of chains that are incorrect and some of the auto map is not working for some reason, maybe it's not exact or the fuzzy is too fuzzy, in terms of trying to match. You can multi-select your chains and just go in this drop down and say none, and you'll see. Well, let me clear that filter. You'll see that all of those were set to none. But just as a quick tip. But let's make sure that we all map by exact and hide those unmapped chains. So, and we'll go back up to the spline. And inside each of your chain settings, if we collapse them into the different sections, you'll see that for the chains that do not have an IK goal assigned, which if you recall, we assigned the IK goal via the IK retargeting panel under these chains here. This is the left arm, and we assign it to the left-hand goal. You'll see that there are no IK settings and there are no speed planting settings for this chain. Because the only thing that is happening is the FK retarget, which if we were to take a look at the left arm and collapse all of these, we can actually see these checkboxes here for each of these individual, let's say like chain phases to an extent, right? Kind of similar to the retarget phases. But we can turn these off, and you can see that the FK retarget and the IK retarget is not happening at all on the arm, so you can individually single out the retargets if you want to, which is pretty cool. Let's reset those and dive into these individual settings. So we'll select the spine, and the rotation mode by default is going to be interpolated. So what this means is you can kind of imagine basically Retargeter is creating a curve on your source and creating a curve on your target and just matching the curves together, and so that way the bones are aligned, and that's pretty much what interpolated is. There are other modes too, such as one-to-one, and one-to-one is super useful if you know for sure that your source bone or your source chain and your target chain have the same amount of number of bones. So this is super useful for like fingers. Fingers would work much better with one-to-one, since we know that there are always three bones for the finger. For some cases, including like the metahumans and I think the FBIK, which I did not include in here, but they do have them. They have metacarpal bones. This is why I did not include them in the finger bones, because the metacarpals are skinned a little bit higher, and most of the time will not be as involved in terms of the the specific finger motion that we get from other softwares or other sources of animation. So because I know the fingers are 3, I set them all to one-to-one, and I can once again multi-select, go to rotation mode, and say one-to-one. The other option under rotation mode is one-to-one reversed. Basically, that's the same thing as one-to-one, but just reverse it. Instead of it being evaluated from the start of the chain, it gets evaluated from the end of the chain. Rotation alpha, we already went over alphas. Translation mode, if you, right now, only rotation is being retargeted on these chains, but if you wanted translational retargeting as well, you can have it be globally scaled based off of what the character is, or you can just have it absolute, meaning that it's going to pin directly towards those chains. Pull vector matching, basically what this does for, let's say, on the arms, if you wanted the pull vectors of the source and the target, which is just the vector in between the start and the end, and you want them to match within where the middle joint is, you can have them match if you want to. So you can see how that elbow gets slightly adjusted up, so that way it matches in the same plane as this source arm. You can also add an offset if you want to. So if you wanted to, let's say, like tuck that elbow in a bit more as that's animating, you can. But I recommend having the matching on, since if you want it to look directly or exactly like how your source is, then that would be your best bet. We can, once again, multi-edit by just going to pull vector matching and hitting 1, and we can see now those planes match better. Those are all the FK settings. And most of the time, in terms of what you would edit, you'll most likely not edit like your spine bones, but you'll edit like your bones that are either the same number of bones as your source. So like the clavicle, which was one bone, and the fingers. But everything else you'll most likely keep as is. And the most settings that you'll probably toy with in regards to retargeting is probably your IK retargeting settings. So let's go ahead and hide chains of IK and only show the chains that have any sort of IK solve. So once again, I can go into here and collapse.fk, and if I wanted to, I could turn off the IK retarget. Oops, I think that auto expands. But you can see I turned off IK, and the arm's there, but if I turn it on, it's up here. And we'll go over some of these. So blend to source is exactly what you would expect within root settings. It's the same exact thing with the IK. So this will, if I turn it on, this will blend the source directly to where the source location was. You can also see that on the legs. You'll see these little markers with your debug draw on, where you could draw source locations. If you look at that leg, you'll see that, okay, this foot is technically like the source is actually over here. This is the retargeted location, but if I wanted to, I can turn that on and that would match. Ideally, in terms of trying to fix some foot sliding, you would probably want blend to source on, and if you don't necessarily want the horizontal motion, you can just keep it at the same height, and it's going to match exactly what the source's height is. And if you want to just be sure, we can zero that out, and we have the source location that way. Now you'll see that it's not directly pinned. That's because I have my weights set to 0, but we can see that with that, it's 100% on there, and I can also do that to the leg if I wanted to. And if we play that back and turn off, or move my source mesh a little bit out just so that way you can see it, you can see that it's directly pinned in the ground, and maybe I don't like that horizontal motion, so I can just do this and just keep the feet pretty planted like that. And that just directly grabs from the source animation, which is great. You'll see that with these green draws, these are actually handle the chain selection as well within the viewport. So if I select this will actually select the the root settings. But if I select these will select the individual chains. And once again, if you don't like any of those, or if you want to change the settings of how you want to draw them, you can always turn them off or scale them down, or thicken them up if you want. Completely up to you. I'll turn those off for now. Static, all of these different offsets. So static offset, basically this just will raise. Actually, let me turn that back on, and maybe turn off the source locations for now. What this will do is, if you look at the goal, this will raise or lower the goal, but this will do it in global space. So this will do it in not in relation to what the goal is at. So I can easily add different offsets if I want to across my animation. Local offset will do the same exact thing, except that it's going to be local. So you'll see that Z is different than the actual world Z. And you'll see that Y is actually handling that kind of up and down right now, and X is doing the moving forward and backward. Rotation is the same as well. It's just that it's going to handle the end effector rotation, which is local, like so. And scale vertical is pretty neat if you have either cartoony characters or if you want blend to source on, but your foot lift is a bit too high, right? Like it's pinned to the ground, but when the foot gets lifted, it gets really high, or maybe it's too low, and that's where you can actually scale the vertical motion of that goal, which is super useful. If you also want to, you can extend the IK if you like. This is using the same extension method that's provided inside the IK rig. And we already went over the last option, which is affected by IK warping. And yeah, a mixture of these settings will allow you to really fine tune how you handle your retargets. For general advice, I recommend uh, first of all, making sure that your retarget poses, which if we go back to the retarget pose, match as close as possible, whether or not not necessarily just on the bones, but actually on the mesh. So let's say, for example, if the leg was a little more bent, even though my legs look straight on the bones, I might want to actually bend the bone a little bit so that way my meshes actually match, not just my bones. That's where a lot of the how you define your retarget and the relationship really starts. And then from there, play a number of different animations and see how you like your settings. If you feel like that you need to fix your foot sliding, especially if you have a very vastly different proportioned character, I recommend, first of all, looking at your IKs and turning on blend to source and just toying around with these weights to see if that really does fix your foot sliding. If that doesn't, then I would recommend going into your global settings and playing with the stride warping just to see if it's your stride that's being the issue. And if that's not the case, then the last method, which unfortunately is not available in UEFN quite yet, is something called speed planting, which I'll go over in a later video. But basically, that will you can create speed curves on your animations and put the name in your speed planting settings and define a certain unplant threshold and speed threshold and all of these, so that way your feet stay sticky. The method of generating that is only available within UE. However, if you have source animations and you have other ways of creating those curves, as long as as long as they're on the animation sequence, you can actually access them and use speed planting if you like. You can create your own curves and do all of that if you want. But yeah, those are all the little nuances and things that I wanted to go over within IQ retargeting and all the settings. And yeah, let me know what you think, and please feel free to provide any feedback down below. All right, thanks. Hi, my name is Greg, and I'm the product manager of IK Retargeting in Unreal. This video is an overview of tips and tricks that I couldn't fit into the previous videos in the series. If you're confused, this is a video part of a course path where I go over how to retarget bipedal characters inside UE and UEFN. Note that some of the following features have not been brought over to UEFN. However, this video will be updated for any release that has changes for retargeting. Now let's dive in.
IK rigs and IK retargeters are shareable across similar skeleton hierarchies. So here I am in Unreal Engine 5, and I am in my IK rig editor, and I have my IK mannequin open. This feature that I'm showing will also work not only in Unreal Engine, but also UEFN. So if you have any of the template IK rigs, including the IKFM mannequin, and there is a skeleton mesh that you have that is similar to the FM mannequin hierarchy, you should be also able to follow along where I have the editor open, and if I switch to, say, my Quinn character, you'll see that my IK rig is retrofitted towards the Quinn character. Now, I might have to hit reset so that way I'm ensure that I have the correct pose, which is the Quinn's incoming pose. And we could see that my IK rig is working just fine. I can pull around. I still have all of my same settings, and we can see that I still am able to get a pose, actually the same pose as mannequin. So if I were to uh, go ahead and leave this and say I went to echo, which has a completely different skeleton, by the way, but shares very similar names. And we can see that it's a different skeleton because there is no IK bones on echo, which are these retarget chains here that we can see. And we can still see that as I'm moving this around, this is still affecting echo, which is great. I can hit reset to ensure that I'm getting the right pose and back to what echo is stand. And this also works across different proportion characters that are sharing the same skeleton. So here I have a set of characters that are different proportioned. That's in my content examples in Unreal. And I've made this IK rig towards this medium size male body character. And if I were to go in and switch to my large male, you'll see that my pose is a little off. So if I hit reset, I'll go back to my initial pose of the large character. And if I were to go down to the small male character, I hit reset again, and we can see that the IK rig still works and is retrofitted towards those proportions, which is great. So how does this play out within Retargeter? Well, within Retargeter, I can say I set the source IK rig as as the same as this character, and the target IK rig for the mannequin, I can say go to Echo and play any of these animations, and we get the retargets across. If I were to change to a different proportion, we can see that it does affect the animation because the animation is being fed in. Then we're looking at the source skeletal meshes pose and retargeting that across. Uh, Medium. If I change it to a medium, you can see I get a completely different workflow. If I switch to Quinn, get something different as well. So there's all sorts of different things that I can try out and ensure that I get the correct proportions. Something else I wanted to point out in regards to retargeting animations from different proportions, especially if you have a similar skeleton, is the fact that you want to take a look at your translation retarget settings and the retarget source property on your animation assets. So this is going to require going into the source skeletal mesh, which I have open on here. Or if you don't want to do it this way, you can also do it within the skeleton. So within here, I've expanded this hierarchy list so that way I can see it all right here. And under this gear icon, I want to open up my show retargeting options. And here I have a bunch of different retargeting options that I have per bone, but I'm going to just filter these so that way I can access the stuff that I know that I want. So I'm going to say, show me only the weighted bones. So those are the ones that are going to control how the mesh is deforming. And I'm going to go into here and say hide sockets because I don't want to look at any sockets. I just want to look at the weighted bones that will affect the final mesh of my character. So right now, the translation retargeting settings are set to skeleton. So basically what happens is we get the animation and then we play it on the skeletal mesh. And the skeletal mesh is the thing that houses the proportions of the character, so i.e. the translational lengths between each of the bones. And then what happens in Retargeter is we look at that as the final pose, so that way we retarget from it. So any edits that we want to do proportionally that are on the same skeleton, we would want to edit the translation retargeting settings. So there's a couple of options here. This setup here is exactly what we want, but just to kind of go over it, we have animation, which is basically just taking the translation animation translation data from the animation asset. Skeleton, which is just using the translational data from the skeleton, so no translation animation for this bone or any of these bones will be coming across from the animation asset. Animation scaled, which is it uses the animation, the translation from the animation, but the scale length is by the skeleton's proportion. Relative, which basically treats the translation from the animation asset as a additive animation, and then orient scale, which would just orient scale the translation animation. So for this, so just to kind of show why this is important, let's say I were to go into here and set all of these to animation. So I can right click and say set recursively to animation and watch how that affects my retargeted animation here. You'll see that my elbow shrunk in because even though I'm using the large body character, the animation that I'm using is actually from the medium character, so which affects how my proportions are going to be changed here. If I were to reset those back to skeleton, we'll get a better and more desired result as the shoulders are a bit more broader and the elbows are coming down, so we get it to the proper proportion. So that's kind of the importance of translation retargeting there. For animation assets, while we do know those translation settings, and that's great, we don't quite know what the retarget source is from. Meaning we don't know what the source proportions are actually uh, the animation is actually using. And that's super useful to note so that way we can properly proportion not only from the skeleton or the skeletal mesh that is, but from the incoming animation as well. So here we will use the retarget source asset. This requires additional setup, but this is super handy because we can just point it to a specific skeletal mesh. And by the way, these are available over on UEFN as well. So in this case, I know I'm targeting the medium character. So let me go ahead and say at male base. And we can see that the hips are actually down now, and I can actually maintain some better hip length between that and the feet and the ground. So if I were to clear this again, we can see that it rose up, which is not ideal. So if you are retargeting with multiple skeletal meshes that share the same skeleton or have a similar skeleton as the source IK rig, you want to make sure that your retarget source asset is set on your animation and also your source skeleton has proper translational retargeted settings. Um, yeah, that's just a nice, easy tip and trick. Another thing I would like to highlight is our duplicate and retarget window. So let's say, for example, instead of having to play all of the animations in your retarget editor and select them one by one and go and export, and then you have to do the operation again and again and again, you don't actually have to use the retarget editor. You can, if you want to, go into your content browser and select any number of animation assets. In this case, I'm going to select these two animation blueprints. And if we were to right click, retarget animation assets, duplicate and retarget animation assets slash blueprints, I will get a little window that pops up and I can specify an IK retargeter. So in this case, I want this to actually retarget to my starfish character. And I can add a prefix. So let's say like RTG underscore. I can do a search and replace. I'm going to change the folder to, no, maybe I'll leave it there. And I want to make sure I have remap reference assets on, especially since I'm retargeting animation blueprints. So I can go ahead and say retarget. And what that's going to do is it's going to create several different animation assets because it's retargeting actually the animations that were referenced in my anograph. So you'll see that it's referencing this one and it's referencing this one, and it's going to put in within the blend uh, blend poses by int. Now, this also works for animations. This works on different types of animation assets. So go ahead and try it out. This is currently only available within UE. However, it will be available within UEFN soon, especially if you want to retarget multiple animation sequences in your content browser. The next thing I'd like to cover is something that we're calling speed planting. So you might have seen this in the previous videos, or you might have seen this in some of our other like documentation or etc. Where if I select my IK chains, you'll see, and if you recall, with our retarget phases, root, FK, and IK, there's a section in our chain settings called speed planting. So by default, this is turned off, but if I turn those on and I were to look at just that section, we see some properties that we can edit. And basically what this does is if I were to play an animation, so let's say the mf run forward, I'll do it from this one. If we are focusing just on the legs or the feet specifically, we'll see that we do have a bit of sliding. We can do all sorts of different edits that we want with the stride warp or the blend to source or any of that sort. But in order to absolutely ensure that we're not getting any sort of feet sliding, and I know it's a little hard with those pointed feet, but if we kind of scrub through, we can see some tiny bits of it here and there. I want to make sure that the feet are more planted, especially as I'm moving super fast. So what I can do is I can open up the animation asset, and this part of the process, by the way, is not available on UEFN. However, speed planting is available for UEFN. So if you wanted to, you could create the curve yourself, whether that's in an outside application or within inside the engine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a UE specific feature called animation modifiers. Oh, I'm gonna pause so that way we're not distracted, and I'm gonna go to Window, Animation Data Modifiers, and the window's just gonna be outside my monitor, and I have these two called Motion Extractor Modifiers, but let's erase these so that way you can see exactly what is happening. So if I go to Add Modifier, Motion Extractor Modifier, and I type in the bone name that I want to use. So in this case, I want to make sure that the feet are planted. So I'm going to say ball underscore L. And under the motion type, we're going to get translation speed. So we can create speed curves from these. And I'm going to say X, Y, and Z. So that way I get all axes. And so that'll be that for my ball L. I'm going to add another one. Um, and we're just going to say ball R, translation speed, set that to X, Y, and Z. So now I can apply those modifiers and we get the speed curves like so. Now, like I was saying, this is only available within this animation data modifiers are only available in UE. But if you wanted to say like eyeball the curve or you have a different way of inputting the data, you can always create a curve. Say this is foot L speed, and you can author these if you wanted to. You can edit this curve and say if you know for sure, like at this point it's planted, you could just do something simple such as adding a key and just moving that up, or adding a key at this time and basically just creating a simple curve like this in order to handle the speed planting that way. So you can see like, okay, cool. Like I know that's there, and like just fudge it a little bit with the numbers, but basically be able to create that curve yourself if you want to. I'll remove that and close that out, and then once I'm in the retargeter, I can actually input the names of the speed curve that is in my source animation. So on my left leg, I know that I was getting ball L translation speed X, so I can copy selected curve names. So selected that, right click, copy select curve names. Right here, delete and paste. So that should paste that there. For my left leg, for my right leg, I'll do the same thing, but I'll just switch that to R. And now when I play, we'll see that the feet are way more planted. And I can up my threshold if I want to, or even change my unplant stiffness or change the dampening of when that gets applied. And we can see there's quite a bit of effect there. But yeah, so that's how you can get your feet a bit more planted. And this feature is available in both UE and UEFN. Once again, it's just the curve authoring is a UE specific feature at this moment. The next tip and trick I like to go over is IK retargeting, but at runtime. So right now I am in my content examples project in Unreal Engine 5, and I'm walking around, but we can see that this Quinn animation is being retargeted to my starfish and my Stackobot here. And if I even look through all of my content example maps, you'll see that they're all being runtime retargeting. We even see an example of speed planting and some other stuff that I'll be going over in just a bit. And what this allows us to do is instead of having to create animation assets constantly for retargeting, we can actually just have them run within our runtime animation system. So let's take a look at those. So I'll escape. And I'm just going to dive into this blueprint that I've created. And this is just a blueprint actor where I've specified my source skeletal mesh being my Quinn character. And I've assigned it this skeletal mesh, this animation asset, and I have two target animation or two target skeletal meshes that are running a animation blueprint that's just called ABP Stackopot Retargeting, ABP Starfish Retargeting. So let me take a look at those, open this up, and we'll see that I am running a what's called a retarget pose from mesh node. So if you're not familiar with that, basically you can just right click, create retarget pose from mesh. And that's what we have here. And under retarget pose from mesh, if we look at the detailed settings, we can see that we have a couple of options. First option is specifying if we're going to be using the attached parent. So technically speaking, I don't have to use the attached parent component here. I could input a source mesh component as a variable if I wanted to. But in this case, I am using the attached parent, so I can leave that on, and by default, that will be on. The next thing I supply is the IK retargeter asset to use. So in this example here, I am using the mannequin to starfish asset, so I can choose that on this one as well. So if I look up starfish, okay, and that'll be assigned to this retarget post mesh node. I can, if I want to, expose this as a pin as well. So if I wanted this to be a variable, I could, in case if I have different retarget assets that I'm using, or I'm changing my source mesh or my target mesh component, et cetera, et cetera. Retarget profiles I'll cover in the next part of the video, and copy curves, which will just copy the curves from the source to the target, anything that will be in common. This is by default true, but you can also turn that off. And all we have to do is just connect this to some output pose. And once we have that, that will allow the runtime retarget to happen. So just a little quick tip if you are interested in runtime IK retargeting. This also works with non-runtime entities such as LiveLink. So if you had, say, for example, your LiveLink source going through your source mesh. So instead of playing this animation asset, you have it use an animation blueprint and you connect the LiveLink pose to there. Then you use the attached parent to then have the LiveLink being running on top of this, like on the source. Then on the target, we have the retarget happening and connect that up to the output pose like so. So as long as any incoming animation is on the source and it can be retargeted, and as soon as you put on the output pose, it will play on your level editor. So yeah, just another neat way of using retargeting in Unreal. As a reminder, this is only available within UE, not UEFN, due to anim blueprint exposure. One of the other things I want to cover is retarget profiles. And this is a UE specific feature that is not in UEFN. And specifically, it is around your retarget post from mesh node. So in the previous part of this video, I went over the settings on the details panel of this, but I skipped out on custom retarget profile. So that's what we're going to go over. So here you see a bunch of different like settings that you can apply, but if you want this to be driven via blueprints or via logic, you can go under bind and expose this pin, and you can then assign this as a variable. And basically what a target profile is, it's a collection of edits around your retarget settings. So if I double click on retarget post or mesh, if not, I can just go to the browse and open the mannequin starfish. The retarget pose, the root settings, the global settings, and all of the chain settings as well can be encompassed in a retarget profile. And you can have different retarget profiles based off of your different retargeting scenarios. So, for example, you might want blend to source on for your arms and legs for a specific setup or reason. But then when you're going to a different part of your animation system, you might want those to be off. And you can author them directly on the asset, but you actually might just want them off just for this time. You don't necessarily want them off all the time. So that's where retarget profiles come in. So within here, I have a retarget profile variable set up that I can input to there, and that's all under my anim graph. In my event graph, I can go in and say on this retarget profile, I could grab certain aspects of it. So I could say, let me break out this retarget profile, and I get a lot of different things from here. I don't have to do it this way, but another way that I could do it is if I were to right click in the blueprint and say get retarget. And we have a couple of different options. So let's say, for example, I wanted to turn off blend to source on my legs for some reason. Or maybe I wanted to turn off speed planting. Oops, it's the wrong one. I can say get chain settings. Oops. From retarget profile. So I'll connect the retarget profile. And I just have to provide the chain name, which in this case, it's the left leg. And then I can grab the chain settings, which if I wanted to, I could break these even further. So if I break this, you'll see that I have it in my split sections of FK, IK, and speed planting. If I wanted to turn off speed planting, so let's say for this one, I can go to set members. What this will do is it will keep a reference to this, and that will just set the members for this. And if I were to connect this up to an event, right now I'm going to have it on update animation, but I could have it on like initialize or something else. I can select my set members, go under here, and I'll say enable speed planting. And I can just say, hey, that's off. And that is my profile. Now, once I'm done with this, I have to grab my profile. So I'll copy, paste, and say set chain speed plant settings based off of that. And just set it right here and say this is the left leg. And I can do that for any of the settings that are in here. So that's on the IK, so say blend to source or any of these things, or FK, or changing the retarget pose. There's all sorts of different edits that I could do and have it stored in my retarget profile and have it updated across the board. And this actually allows you to even animate retarget profile or retarget settings with retarget profiles. You would have these settings as a variable that you can access via cinematics, like so. And that way it will appear in Sequencer. If you want to see a live application of this, we can actually within our content examples map. If I go ahead and play, we have retarget profiles set for what phases are activated. So this showing root, FK, and IK, and this is all using one asset. This one for retarget poses. So you can see a different retarget pose there versus the one that we have set up as fixed. Or live drive values. So I could lower the hips, raise or lower the hips, maintain different the stride warps or the blendosaurus. We can see a difference between that. Same with this speluncle. If I can increase the stride or decrease it, and these are all being driven via retarget profiles. You can have all sorts of different ways to drive your logic, especially if you need to, maintain ground contact, and then you don't need to maintain ground contact later, and you get a better result that way. So profiles are the way to go for different dynamic runtime retargeting setups. Yep, and that's it for retarget profiles. All of these features and more can be found in our documentation around IK rig and IK retargeting. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing what you create inside Unreal Engine.
Hi, my name is Greg Richardson, and I'm the product owner for IK Retargeting and Full Body IK in Unreal Engine and Unreal Engine for Fortnite. Now, this is an addendum to the existing biped guide to show off a new feature within retargeting that allows you to create your retargets faster. So this was introduced in Unreal Engine 5.4 and in UEFN for, I believe, 2920. And if we go into our content drawer, you'll see that under any sort of animations, I can now right click and say retarget animations. Previously, this was in another submenu that was called duplicate and retarget. But if we go under retarget animations, you'll get this new dialog that shows a viewport in some simplified fields that allows you to play animations and see how your retarget process by auto-generating a retargeter. Now, this process will support most common bipedal skeletons. The list of supported skeletons are up on the screen right now. And all of these skeletons will be supported for all the basically able to automatically create full body IK, retarget chains, and we'll apply some sort of auto alignment of the retarget poses. So no matter if your character is in A pose or in T pose, it should try to match as close as possible. This will also work with IK bones and root motion in case if your animations have those as well. So here, for example, I have my source skeletal mesh, which I am using a Mixamo character. And I can go in and look for any sort of character that I have. So let's say, for example, I wanted to do it on my StackoBot here. You'll see that if we open up StackoBot, which you can kind of see a little bit in the thumbnail, that StackoBot is normally in an A pose while our Mixamo character is in a T pose. So you'll see that this auto-retarget process not only align the bones and match the poses, but if I were to play the animation, you'll see that you can automatically get a result really fast and immediately export your animations if you want to. I can preview as many of them as I want within here. And if I want to select any number of these, I can go ahead and select them, export animations. I can create a folder by right-clicking folder and just say retargeted anims. And I have the ability to, still rename. If I want to use the source path, I have that, which would place all the new animations at the same location as the source asset. not going to do that, but that is possible within some of our new features. And I'm going to go ahead and hit export. And I also have the ability to override existing files. So if you're constantly, adding new processes or new animations and you just want to overwrite them instead of create new files, you have this ability now too. But in this case, we're just going to go ahead and export, and that'll create all of my animations super fast, and I'll be able to use those immediately. Just open one of them and we can see that StackAbot is moving well, and root motion is already generated as well, which is awesome. Now, if I were to go back to my characters and go under the Mixamo folder, and let's say, for example, I wanted to retarget animations, but I wanted to retarget to something that isn't supported by the Auto-Retargeter. So let's use this Spelunker creature. It's going to say that it can't find any bone chains between the source and the target, and it's going to have some errors about trying to pin certain bones. So it found the template for Mixamo, but cannot find one for Spelunker. So if I try to play something, it'll try to play it, but mostly on the hip motion, which is okay. But let's say I want some of that leg motion too. Well, I don't have to always use the auto generation. What I can do is I can uncheck this and provide a retargeter asset if I need to. So for this case, I'll just use my Mixamo the Spelunker because I've already defined the chains for the right and left leg, and that's what is going to try to use. You can see how that running looks. It's going to look obviously a little bit different because I am using 2 legs to a 3-legged creature, but I can immediately export those animations using this retargeter, which is super nice and handy. So that way I don't have to open the retarget asset and the retarget editor to access those animations and batch export those. Now, another thing that we can do, so let's go back to the StackAbot. Instead of exporting just animations, I can also export the retargeter assets. And this is super useful, especially if you're runtime retargeting either within UE or using the character device with UEFN, where you need to supply a retargeter asset. So I can go ahead and just say export retargeter asset, and I can define where I want it to. So I'm just going to say retargeted assets and go ahead and export. And it's automatically going to put them into this folder with my auto-generated IK rigs and my auto-generated retargeter. So now if I were to open these, you'll see that all the retarget chains are created along with the full body IK in case if you're going to use this for a target. Same for the, let me go back to the StackAbot character. And also the same for my retargeter. So we'll have all of that ability, and you'll get the same exact results as you saw in the dialogue whenever I hit any one of these animations, and you'll get the results that you were expecting from before. Now, just something to note is within the Auto-Retargeter, all we're doing is using the root pass and the FK pass. We do not turn on IK, partially because this does not always guarantee the necessary results across all the animations as we found. So once you export your retargeter assets, you can turn on IK if you want to, and then re-export within the retarget editor, and do your additional adjustments that we have gone over in other videos within this course. So blend the source and going through all of these different properties in order to fine tune your retarget. Now, if you don't have any sort of character, so like that Spelunker creature that I was showing off earlier, where you want to use parts of Auto-Retargeter, but maybe your custom character is not supported, we still have ways to make it easier. So, for example, if I reopen up this Mixamo character, and if I were to clear each one of these chains for a moment, and I were to get rid of all of the goals and the settings, just so that way we're working from scratch, and deleting the full body IK solver, and clearing the filters and reset the retarget root. We now have buttons within the IK rig in order to auto generate some of these things if you're not using the retargeter. So if you are using the auto-generating retargeter, it will do most of this for you in the background, but you also have access to this within the IK rig editor. So for instance, let's say I already have the smooth smoke character and I didn't use the auto retargeter. So therefore I'm just going to say, hey, auto create me my chains and auto create IK. And boom, that's all good and fine and dandy. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I can now use this on any other retargeter. So if I go back to the auto generated, then that will do this auto match, which we have all of these options here for, as I've covered in previous videos. But yeah, the auto map will work, and it'll try to do an auto align, which will just do a alignment based off of matching of the retarget chains. And that's all under this menu here within the retargeter. So let's say you have like a quadruped and you need it to auto match. You might get a better auto match via here rather than individually manipulating your bones. You can easily do that by going under the edit retarget pose. And if we were to just reset this, just as a simple example, you'll see that StackoBot by default is in a pose, while our Mixable character is in a T pose. So what I can do is I can just say, hey, auto align on all bones, and it'll forcibly put it into a T pose. So now I'm going to demonstrate a workflow where if the auto retargeter does not work because of flipped meshes on the auto alignment of the poses. So this can happen where when you're importing your skeletal meshes and they're not facing the positive Y direction. Now you can fix this by fixing your import transform and just having the offset there, but the retargeter also provides different ways to where you can fix that. So I'm going to go ahead and right click retarget animations. Now I'm going to assign it the Vicon skeleton. Now in this case, I had brought in my Vicon skeletal mesh, and I had it flipped, and also the hips was the first bone, so therefore it's trying to do the ground alignment at 0 because there is no root bone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export the retargeter assets and save it into that same folder that I had before. I'm going to open up my retargeter. It's going to ask me if I want to apply a vertical offset on the root bone, so that way it's off the ground, and I'll say sure, apply that offset. So now that I have this in here, we can see that the Vicon skeleton is basically it's above the ground and it's matching accordingly. But what I'm going to do is I am going to go into edit retarget pose, and I'm just going to reset this all, so that way I get all of my I get my T pose from my Vicon skeleton. And what I can do is under my hips, I am going to apply that 90-degree offset on the Z on the location, so that way we're above the ground. And I can just rotate this 180 on Z as well, just so that way I'm facing the right direction. And once I'm facing the right direction, what I can do is I can select the rest of my bones and say auto align selected. And now I'll get a better auto align across the board. Now it looks like my feet are a little off, so I can either re-rotate that or try to re-auto align based off of either the mesh or just manually edit those. But that's just an easy way for you to tweak those without having to forcibly tweak them onto your skeletal mesh on the import transform. We're really excited to share this feature for all users in UE and UEFN. We look forward to hearing your feedback on our public roadmap, and are excited to see what you create within Unreal Engine and Unreal Engine for Fortnite. Thanks for watching.
Hi, my name is Greg Richardson, and I'm the product owner of IK Retargeting and Full Body IK in Unreal. In this video, we're going to go over some features at a glance that we have released for Unreal Engine 5.4. Let's dive in. The first feature I'd like to highlight is the Auto-Retarget workflow for common bipedal skeletons. You can access this by selecting animations in the content browser, right-click, and hit Retarget Animations to get the brand new dialog. This workflow was designed to simplify and quickly generate a retarget. Simply select animations, choose your target mesh, and see the retargeted animations in the viewport and export. While exporting, you'll get the same dialogues that you see within the retarget editor, with some checkboxes that I'll go over later in this video. The retargeter is auto-generating the retarget chains, then aligning the poses between the source and the target. The list of supported skeletons are here on screen right now, and in the future we plan on being able to support custom non-bipedal skeletons. You can also export the auto-generated retarget results for editing or for runtime retargets. Within the IK rig editor, you can apply the auto-generated results at a click of a button. In the toolbar, click the Auto Create Retarget Chains and the Auto Create IK to get the same results that are done from the Retarget Animations dialog. For warnings or errors, the IK rig output log will output any warnings or missing bones. The editor will pick the best possible template with the least amount of errors. For the IK Retargeter, there's a new button within the Retarget Pose menu called Auto Align. This is skeleton agnostic and will align based on the inputted source and target skeletal meshes. If you want more manual control, you can select specific bones to be aligned. We're really excited to release this for 5.4, and if you would like more an in-depth deep dive in the process of auto-retarget or retargeting bipeds in general, feel free to follow the guide for retargeting bipeds linked in the description below. The next feature I'd like to highlight is the post-retarget phase. This is a new phase that has been added to apply operations after the retarget. Enable post-retarget phase on the toolbar and access the settings on the top right corner. The first one I'm showing here is pin bone. This is useful as you can determine if you want any auxiliary bones, such as IK bones, to be pinned to what the source animations had or change them to the newly retargeted result. You can toggle on and off the operations in the stack to see the result. Another operation we added is the root motion generator. When dealing with root motion for a retarget, it can be different from the source, and you may need to determine it from the retargeted hips instead. This operation automatically is derived from the retarget root in order to achieve that result. You can manually change the behavior, such as copying the motion from the source, change the height by snapping it to the ground, maintain the offset from the hips, rotate with the pelvis, or have it affect bones that are not a part of the retarget. The last operation is remap curves. This allows for a one-to-one remapping of curve animations from the source to the target with new names. You can also copy all source curves to the retargeted animation. Lastly, let's talk about general quality of life improvements. When exporting, you now have the option to use the source path instead of determining a folder. If your source animations are in different folders, you can have the retargeted animations be saved to those folders instead of it being moved into one central location. You also have a checkbox to overwrite existing files when exporting the new animations. No more need to constantly remap the retargeted files. For the full body IK solver, we have added a subsolve to generate better results for bipeds on the IK poll. To activate, add sub iterations on the solver properties and then adjust the chain depth property in the IK goals. Chain depth number starts from the end and works up the chain to apply the subsolve. For runtime retargeting, we have added a property to handle the LOD threshold of the IK retarget phase in the retarget post from mesh node. This allows users to determine whether or not the IK phase is active based on a certain LOD of the target skeletal mesh. You can see here I am forcing the LOD change on the mannequin, which turns on and off the IK phase. For the full body IK node inside Control Rig, we have added a workflow where you can import settings from an IK rig onto the full body IK node. Right-click on the node and select the IK rig that you want to import from. This will also create the effectors as controls in Control Rig with transform nodes connected to the full body IK node. All of these features and more can be found within our documentation pages on the Epic developer community. If you have any feedback on the feature status showcase or any of the other features within Unreal Engine, please feel free to submit it on our feature cards in our 5.4 roadmap. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing what you create with Unreal Engine.